Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Road Ahead report launch for 2025. Thank you for joining us today. It's so great to see so many of you here. And before we get started, I'm just going to do some of the housekeeping for our session today. We're together for an hour, and hopefully you'll have noticed that closed captions have been enabled, and you can turn these on or off by clicking on the CC icon in the toolbar at the bottom of your screen. The slides for today will be shared in the chat as a PDF. So if it's helpful, you can download these to zoom in and out of the slides as we go along. We'd love you to ask questions. And if you have a question, please use the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen rather than chat. Do say hello in the chat. But if you add the questions to the Q&A function, we can keep those in our minds as we're going through. And also we'll get to as many of them as we can at the end of our panel session. In today's session, we're excited to be sharing an overview of this year's Road Ahead report and posing some thought-provoking questions to our panellists. This year's Road Ahead examines challenges and opportunities that charities in the UK are currently facing. And it highlights key issues such as economic pressures, shifting political dynamics, changing workplace environments, and the need for strong foundations to ensure resilience and sustainability. We won't be able to pick up on all of these areas today, but Sally Stevens, our lead governance consultant at NCVO, will talk us through some of the risks in the year ahead that the report has identified. Then I'm so delighted to say that we've got a fantastic panel. We're being joined by Natalie Bate from Zurich, who's Head of Education, Charities and Social Organisations at Zurich. And Zurich is this year's Road Ahead sponsor, so thank you. And Pippa Sargent, CEO of the Brain Charity. So throughout the session, bear in mind your questions, stick them in the Q&A, and we'll come to as many of them as possible. And now, so that we are absolutely straight into the meat of today, I'm going to hand over to Sally. Thank you very much, Sally.
Thank you, Priya. As you've heard from Priya, the Road Ahead is our annual assessment of the changing landscape for the NCVO members and voluntary sector organisations across the board. And in this year's report, which, as Priya said, is delivered in partnership with Zurich, we're exploring the key risks, opportunities and strategic opportunities for charities and voluntary organisations to look at in this coming year. Together, we're hoping that we can offer actionable insights and practical guidance, which helps our organisations navigate what can be an uncertain time and an uncertain future. Our aim in this work is to equip charity leaders with the information and strategies needed to sustain, to grow your impact, and that's in this coming year and beyond. So in the next few slides, we'll explore some of this year's key findings. Broadly speaking, in our report this year, we've picked up on three big themes which emerged. We recognise that the charity sector is standing at a crossroads in 2025, facing an evolving landscape shaped by economic pressures, policy changes, and shifting public expectations. So over the course of the next few slides, I will look at the key elements that we've seen in each of these thematic areas. And starting with our first area, the year of the big squeeze. The unpredictable and challenging times the charity and voluntary sector has experienced in recent years do look set to continue as we move forward and into 2025. And for many organisations, this has been the perfect storm. Funding has fallen, costs have increased, and our demand for our services and how we support our communities continues to climb. And with the public under significant financial pressures of their own, charities are really feeling that strain, that squeeze, and face increased competition for every pound. The coming financial year will be a squeeze for many. We know that. And the risks that pose could be high. But we also recognise that there's an opportunity within this. Necessity always creates opportunities for innovation. Our next thematic area is evolving political landscapes. The election of new government in July 2024 has meant a shift in the political landscape for the voluntary sector. With the development of the new Civil Society Covenant, a focus on Labour's 5 missions and spending review all on the horizon, charities will need to get to grips with the key new policy priorities and operational changes that will shape the environment for charities. This political landscape presents a complex mix of some areas which will be challenging, but some which will offer opportunities for charities, voluntary organisations and service providers. But to capitalise on those opportunities, we need that really strategic engagement with our policymakers. We need to be ready to proactively adapt to regulatory shifts, and there are a real range of regulatory shifts expected, and to focus on sustainable funding models, so that we're able to navigate that road ahead of us. Our third thematic area looks at the shifting dynamics in our workplaces. Many sectors are still adjusting to the workplace changes that the pandemic brought, the impact of that real need to completely transform how we engage with our work and how we deliver the variety of services that we seek to provide for our members, for our beneficiaries, and for the communities that we serve. In our sector, of course, we're no different in terms of still adapting to those workplace changes. And it goes beyond just where and how people work. There's also a generational and technological shift in workplace culture and operations, which needs to be considered when we're thinking about how we progress what we do for the people that we serve. The voluntary sector continues to demonstrate real resilience, creativity, and determination in the face of unprecedented levels of challenge. So as we step further into 2025, charities and voluntary organisations will remain at the forefront of tackling some of the most pressing social issues, from poverty and inequality to climate action and community cohesion. But we know that road won't be easy. Economic uncertainty, difficult funding landscapes, and those evolving political priorities that we've just spoken about require us to constantly review, rethink how we operate, how we collaborate with one another, and how we advocate for important change in our own sector and beyond to those that we serve and support. I hope that that has been a useful starting point summary of our Road Ahead report, and those 3 real key thematic areas that we've picked up on. And as I'm sure you've heard while I've spoken, there's a real interplay between our financial squeeze, which, while we never want to characterise our sector only in financial terms, really can't be underplayed. The changing political landscape, which we're all seeking to navigate, those adjustments or changes in regulation that we're going to need to understand and engage with in the next 12 months, and then how our workplaces and the work we do is changing and adapting to meet those ever-evolving needs. So I'll pass back to Priya to start our panel discussion.
Thank you very much, Sally. That has been so helpful, really gives us the context for the rest of our time together today in today's discussion. So we know that these insights are so important for us all, because then we can plan together in relation to what we're hearing, and it certainly shapes our advocacy work for all of our partners and members across our sector. So I'm really pleased now to bring Natalie and Pippa into the conversation. So we're going to start off with 3 questions that sort of encapsulate many of the issues that people have been sort of talking to us about, and then we'll build in any of the questions that you have. So do use the Q&A function. So I'm going to start off with asking our panel how they feel charities are responding to the current financial pressures. Have they had to scale back, restructure, innovate? What are the sort of things? And I'm going to come first to Pippa. Thank you very much, Pippa.
Thank you, Priya. Really interesting to see your Road Ahead report and the key areas that you're presenting in that. They're very pertinent for us as a charity. Just a bit of background, we are a charity based in Liverpool, but we have national reach and we provide support to people with a whole range of neurological conditions, of which there are 600 plus, and 1 in 6 of us live with a neurological condition. So it's quite a heavy remit. And we've been around for 30 years, so we've got some good experience of being in the charity sector. And as I said earlier, it does resonate with us, the things that you're putting in the Road Ahead report. We are in a year of a big squeeze. We recognise that we've got some bumpy times ahead in terms of fundraising and in terms of maintaining the work that we do. So as a health charity, we support information and advice for individuals. We also do counselling and coaching. We have activities at the centre and online, including a neuro gym, and we do training as well, for example, neurodiversity in the workplace training across the country and internationally. So there's quite a wide remit for us there. And what's been really good about that is that having that diversity of what we do does give us a lot of scope. And that's been very helpful. Having a very strong local base as well helps us with the local element of what we provide. But actually, we're a national charity, so we've got to think bigger on what we do. I would say that what the pressures on us are probably in 3 different areas. So firstly, for our clients and our community, number one, because that's what we're there to serve, and we have as much as possible of what we raise into those frontline services. In fact, more than 80% goes into that. Obviously, there's a huge demand out there, and being a health charity, anybody who works in this health or social care field will know around the welfare reforms are going to have an even bigger impact on demand for the kinds of services that we offer. So we're really crucially aware of that and what's coming. We already have a really big demand for our counselling services, mental health being a very important area for a lot of the charity work and a lot of the impact since COVID, and particularly linking with neurological conditions. There's a big overlap. So that's a big element of what we want to continue and keep strong. But I think also we've got the policy changes are worrying our community. I have people come up to me in the centre, our clients, and say, I'm worried. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know how this is going to impact on me. So it's having an impact across the board for our clients and community. The second area for me is around how that impacts on our staff. So aside from working in the charity sector, our staff, obviously, they want to do really good work and they want to support these clients. But when our waiting lists go up, that impacts on them personally. We've brought in a wellbeing programme to support our staff. And also we're very aware that this idea of we can't get to everybody. The list is never going to end because of that demand. It's something that's a personal and organisational need for us to pay attention to. There is some burnout in the sector. We know that there's going to be when you have those kinds of pressures, and making sure that we support our staff through that is really important. 50% of our staff have lived experience of a neurological condition or a neurodivergent condition. So again, there's extra demands on our staff in the round when we have, and we embrace that lived experience in our workforce and in our volunteering. We'll all be aware that as charities, we are not exempt from the national insurance rise, and I couldn't do this webinar without commenting on that. Much as we've campaigned, that's the case. And for us, we actually have launched a campaign recently about that. We've been very open about this is going to cost us £35,000 this year for the charity. And that takes away from our frontline work. £35,000 could fund 900 hours of welfare benefits advice. It could support a full year of counselling for over 200 people. It can 35 people a week could access our service with that money. And obviously we can't find that money from nowhere. So we've launched a campaign. Have a look at thebraincharity.org.uk if you want to see how that's working, to try and really just make it very visible that this is having an impact on us. For me as a CEO, that raises some difficulties, obviously, particularly with what I've said earlier about supporting our staff. I have to make the difficult choice between, do staff have a pay rise this year when we've got this additional national insurance pressure? And I know that some charities have already made those decisions around the national insurance equates to no pay rise this year, and that's very difficult in a demand heavy environment that's increasing. So those are the difficult choices that I will have to make. We've also got difficulties around our funding. I'm preaching to the converted here. Everybody knows we've got a difficulty around the grants and trusts environment is much narrower than it used to be, expanded in COVID, and it's narrowed down, but there are more people asking for that money, and it's taking grant organisations a lot longer to make decisions. So in terms of our financial planning, the projections are difficult to make because we don't always meet the deadlines of when decisions are going to be made. We do have a very diverse funding portfolio, but again, some of that money also comes from legacies and wills and trusts, so we don't know when that's coming either. So it adds to the mix of uncertainty, which doesn't help us in terms of building sustainability for the future. But that is exactly what we're trying to do, is build that sustainability for the future. And so the third way in which this impacts is on our organisation. So how do we help our organisation with the systems to make sure we are as robust as we can be? We have a full CRM system in the charity, customer relationship management system, which helps us look at where the most demand is coming from, look at how much time we're spending on things. We're doing a full programme in the next strategy, which is launching this year, around the outputs, outcomes and impacts that we want to make as a charity, because we know having a really strong view on that is going to help us in terms of our fundraising activities, including social value as well, looking at the social value piece in more detail. We already have quite a lot of AI work within the charity, so we do we're quite ahead in terms of our use of AI in the charity, and that's definitely helping in terms of productivity internally. But I would guard against having a really strong understanding of where the boundaries lie around AI. But that's a way of innovating within the charity to help support us being able to meet that increased demand by the staff that we have having better tools available to them to do. So I think that's probably it for me. I know we'll need to move on to the next speaker, but I very much welcome questions that might come at the end of this session and to answer them as fully as I can. So thank you very much for inviting me, and yeah, over to you, Priya.
Marvellous, Pippa, really helpful, very clear, and thank you for the breadth of that. We've already got some questions in specifically about how you've approached something, so thank you, and I know we'll follow up on those. Sally, can I bring you in here to just give us some of your thoughts? There's some questions coming in around approaches that we might have to local infrastructure support. What's the feel about mergers, and what's, if anything, that we can see is being lost from that? So do you have any thoughts on that?
I think that, you know, a really key theme in the context of this question, how charities are responding to those current financial pressures, is that the final point on the slide, which is we are seeing a lot of innovation, and I think that can come in lots of different forms. Someone's asked whether or not we're seeing a growth in mergers, and that absolutely has been the case over the last few years. We've seen more charities looking at changing their shape, whether that's by merger, whether that's in another way as an option. And there are some really useful reports out there by other parties that look very specifically at that kind of charity merger index. There are lots of ways actually that our organisations can change, adapt and innovate. And from a governance perspective, I think the key thing that I'm always encouraging those organisations that I'm speaking to and the boards that I'm speaking to think about is what are the things which you do well? What are those kind of unique selling points of your organisation? What is sat there in your objects that is helping drive you towards your cause? And are there ways that you could still achieve those objects with a new, different approach, with a partnership model, in a consortium? And to really encourage organisations not to be afraid to take that step if there's a way to have greater impact while answering the question of, but how can we do that in the context of a really pressured financial environment? The same is true of actually developing new and innovative income streams. Lots of charities feel that they, you know, need to be very anchored to what might be more traditional sources of funding, like grants or fundraising models which we're seeing a degree of decline. So things like lottery fundraising, very effective for certain organisations, but broadly speaking, we are probably seeing a decline in their effectiveness as a fundraising strategy. And so more organisations are looking at whether or not they do have the scope for something like primary purpose trading, or even secondary trading through a subsidiary model, and looking at, actually, how can we pivot and how can we change the shape of what we do while still staying within the bounds of our trust, within the bounds of what we set out in our objects. And at the most extreme end, there are boards that are looking at actually diversifying by changing those objects. And that is still on the table actually for any of our organisations. There's a good governance approach to that. There needs to be the right consultation with your stakeholders. But actually, if the financial pressures are such that you really can't continue delivering what you're seeking to in the model you have now, to have a step back and look at whether or not there's an opportunity for change.
Really helpful, Sally. And we've got a number of questions coming in around good use of AI, etc. So we'll pick that up a bit later. I want to move us now to our second area that we're going to look at, which is how can organisations build resilience and prioritise risk planning when so many are in this moment of survival. And I'd like to turn to Natalie, please, to start us off.
Thank you so much, and good morning, everyone. It's an absolute delight to be here. It's been lovely seeing you all, saying hello and where you're from on the chat, and seeing everybody introduce themselves. So thank you for having me. It's an absolute pleasure to sponsor the Road Ahead again. When thinking about this question, I kind of framed the word survival, and I think that probably struck a chord with most people here in various guises, personally, organisationally, through the last few years of what we've gone through in the Global Forum, but kind of linking the word survival to resilience, and resilience being absolutely fundamentally underpinned by risk management, including insurance solutions. We shared a view in the report that whilst we are absolutely in a volatile and unpredictable global landscape, it's completely key for charity and voluntary organisations to anticipate challenges and make sure that they are building resilient strategies to plan for the risks that may emerge, that probably will emerge, and those ones that we're not even sure what they might turn out to be, but having that adaptable and resilient culture in an organisation to help you navigate through. So the question, Priya, kind of lands in two parts. How can organisations build resilience? I'll focus in on that first. And I think it's fair to say that in times of volatility and threat, people and organisations alike can be really tempted to retract back into protection mode, and become really internally focused, a bit like fight or flight. And actually looking outwards to build the resilience can be really beneficial rather than just looking inside your organisation. And to that end, building relationships with your partners and stakeholders to maximise the strength of the whole rather than trying to solve things in isolation will really help you build resilience. And collaboration was mentioned earlier. And absolutely the benefits of collaboration just sing through in this aspect. But I think in terms of understanding and understanding who else is involved in your delivery of your services and how you operate your business really means understanding what your partner's priorities are too, what challenges they're facing, and where there can be mutual benefit of collaborating on those issues and sharing ideas together. It enhances your resources, it enables best practice to be shared, and clearly provides opportunity to everybody involved. I'd also add in, kind of alongside thinking about your partners, equally your suppliers and your supply chain can add value in this aspect too, where they're open to it, kind of really focusing on turning relationships into partnerships. And I'm really proud to work for Zurich, because I know that our proposition goes so much further than just providing a policy and paying claims. We've got risk experts that are on hand to help and support you, propositional enhancements such as rehab support to get your people back to work quick as possible to enable your business to continue to deliver. We know how vital it is what you do, and we're so proud to support the sector. Thinking about your people is another aspect. And one of the first things I think that it's tempting to kind of rein in an organization in that fight or flight mode is stopping investing in training and development. But it's a bit of a false economy. And actually having a skilled and knowledgeable workforce is better equipped to handling those challenges that will come through, and it enables you to be more adaptable to those. It does include governance functions such as risk, and effective governance and leadership providing oversight really keeps your organization and your community safe, and really enables informed decision making to help you navigate those challenges. And thinking of that, being prepared, I guess, to the more practical solutions that we talked about earlier, that being a practical webinar. My advice is developing those crisis management plans now and thinking through your various scenarios, such as reputational damage, weather events, will minimize your disruption from the events if and when they happen. It enables you to just go into kind of really effective mode and focusing immediately on the things that matter in that moment, which enables you to respond and recover much more quickly. And we can help you with that. So we've got guidance notes, experts in the field to help you develop those plans if your organisation would benefit from that. We also do regular webinars, which are available to our customers and to NCVO members, and through our consultancy support too. So things like horizon scanning workshops we can do with your organisation, where we can provide the kind of the prep work and the expertise to help you run that really successfully. And also will help your leadership team build your own expertise and develop your own skill set. So you've got it in-house as well, and you don't always have to look external for the support. So that's kind of the first aspect. The second aspect, how can organizations prioritize risk planning? And, you know, clearly coming from an insurance background, I'm going to say please do, and that it's really important to do so. But from a practical point of view, I think following a structured approach will help you in your organization, clearly facilitated by the right skills and the right stakeholders at the right moment. But having a clear risk management framework that is aligned to your strategy and your objectives means that when you're having those discussions, they can be really focused, and it places risk at the heart of decision making at all levels of your organization, and enables it to be part of your strategy conversations, not something that sits on the side of your organization. And I think conducting your risk assessments quite regularly means that they're not that one-off exercise that is less regular. You're repeating kind of the intros and the understanding for a lot of people. It's a bit more kind of dynamic. Your risk identification is more fluid, and make sure that your management is up to date and those meetings feel more dynamic and less onerous. So I think both sides, kind of looking inside of your organization, prioritizing it, enabling a structured support, a structured approach to doing it, and also looking outside of your organizations to key partners to come and help you deliver that alongside you. And, you know, I'll just underline again, we're absolutely so proud to partner with you on lots of these topics, having done so for kind of 20 odd years in the sector, and continue to do so, continue to be really, really proud of the work that this sector does.
Thank you very much, Natalie. And I think it's good to know what practical things have really worked and helped in these circumstances. And we need partners and support, so it's really good. And I can see in the chat as well and the thumbs ups that we're getting from the things that you've said. Pippa, may I bring you in as well now? And there are a couple of things that are coming up in the questions about ensuring our attention to volunteers with disabilities, how we really, you know, those things that can sometimes get lost in the midst of all the other things that we're concentrating on that are vital and fundamental to us. That would be really grateful to hear your thoughts on that as well.
Yeah, sure, thanks. There's so many things about what you said, Natalie, that have sparked things for me here around what's happening in the charity. First of all, I'd say absolutely in terms of collaboration and partnership. Working together, being open and communicative about what our collective needs are and also collective challenges is really important. So we've already started looking at that, for example, in a joint bid around our neurogym. Currently, we get lottery funding for that. We're in a 1.5 years of a 3-year. We need to be looking again. We're working with 2 other areas that have similar things and thinking, how can we put something together that's collective for all of us? But also we have in the area that I work, we have the Neurological Alliance, which is an alliance of all charities that support people with neurological conditions. And that's great to be part of because there's a collective voice for policy change there. We don't have a public affairs person, we're not big enough for that. But also I look to the Neurological Alliance to help with that. So that collaborative body, if you've got it in the field that you work, can really help almost be part of the agenda without having to invest and keep your focus on the clients that you support. I would say, yes, balancing risk and innovation is something that we do a lot in the charity. We do have a disaster recovery plan and a risk management framework that you mentioned, Natalie, but we don't want our risk to prevent us doing what we do so well in the voluntary sector, is innovate, is try things, is not carry on doing what we've always done to get what we've always got, you know, to try the new things. So we need to balance that all the time. But of course, the risk management is good business, and we need to be here, don't we, to carry on supporting our communities. So yeah, I think in terms of supporting people with disabilities, it's a big part of our strategy to be looking at how we increase understanding and awareness and acceptance of people with disability in wider communities. And you know, that's, I'm sure, for a lot of people who support those types of communities, it's really key. It's not going to change because of the current pressures that we're facing. It's an absolutely key and critical part of what we do. And I think bringing in our clients and our lived experience to say what that is and what it needs to be in terms of that campaigning angle, but also in terms of the services we provide is always going to be really critical.
And Priya, do you mind if I just jump in on
Please do.
It's just something that's you sparked there, Pippa, in terms of kind of that engagement between your risk management framework and thinking of risk, and you know, framing it in a real positive light, that it's not there to hold you back and to put barriers in place and to have the no, you can't, but it's really there to keep you safe, to keep your organization delivering. And a really good risk management framework and identification framework just enables that innovation to continue and keeps you safe within boundaries to keep doing it and failing fast and trying different things, but knowing that you've already considered those risks and you've put various mitigations in place, or an awareness of them, just helps you to continue to innovate too. And it should never be that document that you pull out thinking this is the thing that holds us back.
It's such an important dynamic, isn't it? It's the risk to allow us to do what we want to do, risk to innovate, and as Pippa absolutely says, you know, being able to take that, be courageous in our sector is almost our sort of USP in a lot of ways, isn't it, as to why we can do things. So the understanding of it, but don't let it stop you. Let's do this well. But let's do what we need to do. Really helpful. I'm going to move us to our next question, which is, how do we make good decisions in these challenging operating environments? And I'm going to turn first to Sally to lead us on this.
I think that this is a question that is at the forefront of so many of our decision makers' minds at the moment. When we don't have all the information, the need to make a decision anyway can feel like the most astounding challenge. And that's the position that our boards are in. That's the position that our senior staff are in. It's really the position that most decision makers in our organisations are in really regularly at the moment, is having to take a step forward, having to progress something, whether it's a programme in an organisation, whether it's development of a new strategy, in a landscape which is highly uncertain and where we are having to make a lot of assumptions. And in those conditions, the most useful thing that we can always rely on is what are our strong decision-making principles in our organisation, and how can we align our decision-making to those principles? So we can't always have all the information we need. And I regularly use an example when I'm delivering training to boards where I say, you can check out the window, you can look on your weather app, you can remember what the weather was like yesterday, but that doesn't mean that if you step out the door without a coat this morning, you won't be rained on. We make good decisions that are well informed, and they don't always go the way we might have hoped because our world is constantly changing around us. What we can do is lean on the tools that we have available to us to gather as much information as is possible from a number of different perspectives, to engage in skilled advisors where we need them. And there's lots of advice out there available for charities. We have a small charity advice line here at NCVO, which anyone can access for questions about HR, finance, governance, the breadth of what is needed to lead a charity. So access professionals, make use of all of the voices that you have available in your decision making, to hear from those with lived experience, those with particular skills, those with specialist knowledge, those with a different background to your own, who might be experiencing the work you're doing slightly differently. And then make sure that you are gathering the right people to make that decision. The beautiful thing about decision making in charities is it is very rarely on the shoulders of an individual to make a decision alone. We really lean on our collective decision making power, and it strengthens our ability to make the best possible decisions even in uncertain times. So returning to some of those governance fundamentals: when should you make the decision, possessed of what knowledge, with whom in the room, with how many people, and how can you make the decision as reassured and as safe as possible, as Natalie was saying in the previous point. What are the mitigations, what are the tools that you've got around the edges to make sure that those decisions are not immediately destined to fail? How are you holding contingency if you're making a financial decision? How are you deploying your team if you're making a decision that's going to relate to your staff, your volunteers, or whoever it is that's kind of constructing that human side of your organisation? So having those fundamentals in place, having a really good sense of what those tools are that are actually part of the decision-making process, I think is, it's a real foundational element to making good decisions, even when actually the context around those decisions is turbulent and is uncertain.
Thank you very much, Sally. I'm going to bring Pippa in for any thoughts.
Hi, yes. Absolutely. There's so much you said there. I really like the weather analogy. It's so true. We can look at all our data all we want, but it doesn't mean it's not going to change tomorrow, of course, in terms of what we need to do. I think my solution to that would be, yes, have your robust systems, and absolutely I agree, Natalie, around those systems should support innovation. And the decision making that you described, Sally, but relationships with others are really important here. So we talked before about partnerships. We're going to know more about what's going to happen in the future if we discuss it together and have that collaborative outlook, if you like, to protect the work that we do in this sector, which is so important for people. So my thought on that would be to make sure we link with other people, and we are doing this now here, aren't we? But there'll be many more opportunities to do that, so that's a really good thing.
Thank you. And Natalie, did you have any thoughts?
I think sometimes just making a decision is often the best next step forwards, and not being in that kind of waiting for all parts of the answer to come through, because if it's never as simple as that, and you'll probably be waiting for a very long time. And then I think just remembering the kind of, as Sally was saying, that the good frameworks to making good decisions and good, well-informed decisions doesn't always mean complete information. It just means making the best decision on the information you have at the time. Flipping that also into, sometimes it's not appropriate to make a decision, and your decision is, I'm not making a decision on that yet, and here's why. And communicating that can go such a long way. And then maybe my third aspect to decision making is not to be stuck with the decision that you have made if the things around you have changed, or it doesn't look like it's going the way you thought it would. don't be afraid to kind of unmake that decision, make the next decision based on the next information that came through. And it's not a failure of a decision, it's a new decision based on something else that you've learned.
That's really, really wise and helpful. I'm going to come to, so there's a number of questions in the Q&A that are around exactly this, and I think we've covered quite a lot of that. There are questions around finding volunteers, and we'll come to that in a minute and have a think about that. But just in terms of decision making, there are a few questions about the use of AI. And that's very topical for us all, isn't it? How do we make good decisions around AI, the use of AI, the ethical use of AI? Without constraint, can I just turn to you all for your thoughts in that area? Who'd like to start? Come in, Pippa.
Yes, thanks, Priya. So as I said when I was speaking earlier, we have been embracing AI for some time now. One of the things that's really important for us, and it will be a system thing, is that how we use AI in the organisation is generative and is to support some of our back office stuff. And it really, really can take the amount of time you need out, be it through, analysing meeting recordings or helping you with a new job description that you might need. But what we've decided is to have a very closed system within the organisation to protect us from the biases that we know are out there with open source AI. So we actually use the Microsoft system, but what we know is that when we're searching in our system, it will only draw on information that we have, which is great, and it makes it much safer for us. And it means that we'll always have to do what I would say is the 80-20 thing. You can never assume that if anything more than 80% is accurate, really. You have to change at least 20% of what you have. And it would be foolish not to, really, because we have to have that human perspective, don't we, on what's being output in words. And I think that's been an important part of training for the staff. So at the moment, we have, not all the staff have access to the AI. We've been rolling it out from the senior team onwards, and also doing trials for different members of staff to see whether that's something that can be helpful in their work. Fundraising, for example, would be really helpful to have that, but we also need to understand about what are we asking for. It's not writing or fundraising for us. So, but unanimously, everybody has enjoyed being able to find out more about how AI helps. So when one of our HR staff is writing a job description and finds that, I can take these two and press that button, and in a second I have some options there, which I then need to look through. I mean, it really is a game changer in terms of how much time these functions take. But again, 80-20, never expect to not have to change some of that. You're always going to have to do that. The other thing we've also experienced is around, we only use our work emails to do this internally within the closed system. So we have to be very careful, obviously, about personal information. Everybody will be aware of this, which is not as much of an issue if you have a closed system. But if you're going to go out to ChatGPT openly, then that will be something that needs to be considered. And we don't encourage our staff to do that unless they're using their own personal account and they want to bring some of that information back and check it in with the closed account internally.
Fantastic, so clear. And Natalie, can you share with us anything about Zurich's approach to AI and what you've learned?
Really, really similar to Pippa's, actually. Personally, I'm on a journey with AI from, crikey, what is this? And how is it going to work? And do I have any concerns about it? To genuinely, I'm not sure I could do my job as effectively as I do without the power of AI. And I do touch it every single day in various aspects. So to a complete convert. I think Zurich's approach, again, Pippa's touched on it, is around training our staff to understand AI, its limitations as well, and some of the risks that are inherent within an AI solution. And as part of that, making sure that whenever you are developing or using an AI solution, I guess not to 100% only have that solution at your fingertips, that part of it is making sure that the human comes back into that process at some point to verify, to double check, to make sure that it is an expected response. And that's kind of in terms of the limitations of the AI solution. But I guess embracing it and really just trying it and having a go with certain parts of AI. We've got a tone of voice tool. We've got Zurich Chat, which is our internal version of ChatGPT, and that allows us, like Pippa said, to kind of use our own data safely and securely. And also our other approach and a framing of our AI solutions and use is ethics, and making sure that we are considering the ethics of AI, because a solution and as we know, digitalization can run at such a pace. We just need to make sure that it's ethical use too.
Thank you both very much. And there's some questions about the support that NCVO can give in this area in relation to AI, and that is very much the sort of thing that we're looking at the moment. So more on that to come. I'm going to pick up on some. Oh, come in, Pippa.
Sorry, I just wanted to add, it's a really interesting discussion. We could have a lot longer on this, but it is obviously going to be very helpful for people with different neurodivergent conditions, particularly dyslexia. So, some of the staff in our organisation that have dyslexia it really is that game changer. They can write anything without the time that it's taken them to do. Obviously, there is a learning curve. So sometimes when you're starting out with AI and you write an email, we know it's not been sent from that staff member. It doesn't look like them. And we have to do that kind of changing, but actually for accessibility, it's really helpful too.
Absolutely well said. Yes, the idea that it's either the panacea and the answer to everything, or alternatively the end of the world as we know it, is neither of those things will be true. There's opportunities and risk in all of it, and it's so good to have this conversation, and we'll build on that. I want to take us then to the issue of skills for organisations, both in terms of employed skills and also volunteers. There's a number of questions about how we build those skills. And then there's a question around evolving local government footprint. So we'll come to that one next. Sally, may I turn to you on the environment for skills in organisations?
Absolutely. Thanks, Priya. We did a piece of research last year which looked at particularly trustee recruitment and the challenge of building skills and knowledge at that senior level within our organisations. And it was, quite, some quite difficult reading actually in terms of the challenge of recruitment in the sector and getting the right people with the right skills to lead our organisations really effectively. AI was one of the things that came up within that area of significant skill gap in our current environment. And I think one of the things which we have known to be true for a long time is that the nature of the requirement for so much of our workforce to be voluntary, whether that is volunteers within the kind of landscape of our delivery, or whether it's those volunteers who are leaders, such as our subcommittee members or our trustees. The necessity for that voluntary workforce brings its own particular set of barriers, because there are reasons why certain people find it easier to volunteer. It is fundamentally easier to volunteer if you are possessed of a lot of spare time, have the ability to use that time in whichever way you wish, can do so in a way that allows you to be kind of mobile, and particularly at the decision-making level, that you have the confidence that you are making decisions that you are well informed in. So we do tend to see that volunteers are therefore older, often white, often financially privileged, and in those kind of higher socioeconomic bands, often able-bodied, and often men in terms of some of those decision-making positions. And those are realities that we have to contend with when we're looking at how we build our volunteer base and our volunteer network, is that there are some systemic and there are some structural barriers that we're constantly working to address. The ways that we can address those are firstly to acknowledge them, to recognise that they exist, and to start thinking about actually how are we putting our opportunities out in the world in a way that allows a greater diversity of people to be involved. So when we're looking for skilled individuals, to support us in a voluntary capacity, are we requiring those people to be skilled, or are we requiring them to be experienced? Because you can be incredibly skilled if you've just finished your law degree. In fact, your knowledge of the law is going to be the most up-to-date possible. But if every opportunity that you see to voluntarily use that also requires you to have 10 years of experience, we're not going to be able to tap into that individual. So understanding some of these nuances around, do we mean skilled, do we mean experienced? Is there a reason why we're selecting one of those two things preferentially? Sometimes experience is incredibly valuable, but let's be clear about that. Let's say why we need that person to be experienced rather than skilled. Do we need them to have demonstrable practical knowledge? How are they going to demonstrate that? And how can we test that in a way that's fair and recognises neurodiversity, recognises different modes of communication? How can we involve people who might not have English as a first language? There are lots of these barriers which are quite innate to the way that we choose to approach people and choose to provide opportunities. When we think about volunteering at other levels, do we have to have a very defined time frame where people have to volunteer? Do they have to give a certain number of hours, or can we be more flexible to accommodate volunteering around people's other existing commitments? Can they volunteer in innovative ways? Are there opportunities to volunteer which can be remote? What type of supervision do they need, and how might we be able to provide that supervision, again, in those kind of more innovative ways that doesn't require a volunteer to be turning up for 4 hours at a defined location, for example? And I think we're seeing a lot of that innovation take place. So when we think about organisations that are operating kind of phone lines and helplines, so many are moving to having chat options, to having remote volunteering as an opportunity, to having shorter periods of volunteering as an opportunity. It comes with additional work, and in that kind of squeezed environment where we know that our organisations are needing to use every penny of time really efficiently, that can feel challenging to deliver a kind of service model change. But at least having the conversation and considering, actually, how can we tap into that huge number of people who really want to contribute to our sector, who really care, who really value the work that we do as charities, but they just don't see themselves in it. And one of my favourite phrases from the world of equality, diversity and inclusion is, you can't be what you can't see. If we don't create positions that allow a diverse range of people to participate, it's very difficult for a diverse range of people to feel like they have a place in those spaces. And actually, some quite minor changes can create some really effective results. Doing that open advertising for your trustees is a game changer in terms of the types of people who you might have applying. Offering just an hour session where people can ask questions about what it means to be a trustee can double the number of people who are applying for that opportunity. So little interventions can make a really big difference when we're thinking about, actually, how do we access the wide range of skilled people who exist in the world? What is the language we're using? What questions are we asking? And are we showing them their own face and showing them they can be part of what we're doing?
We had a phenomenal response to a really simple change that we made to our advertising in Zurich a couple of years ago. We made it policy that every single advert would be advertised, job advert, full-time, part-time or job share, and explicitly so. And the results of the types of people that then applied for those roles, the types of people, the variety of different backgrounds, and the diversity of applicants and the volume of applicants went through the roof. And so just putting things out there in that you're standing to, committing to as an organisation, and then following through on, has such an impact.
So true. Pippa, did you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I love that idea, Natalie. That's great to make sure you keep your job application or volunteer application open. We also do some inclusive activity around providing questions in advance for those interviews as well, which we found works really well. We're just honing how we do that now. So it's not weeks in advance, it's just in advance, and it's fair to everybody, but everybody gets those questions in advance. So it helps them have a more of a level playing field, if you like, when they go through that process. But in terms of volunteering, we do have some sponsors within the Brain charity that have worked with us for some time, or partners that we work with. One of the partners is Malmaison, which is great. And we also have a couple of other partners, and it's about how can they help us by fundraising, but also they've got lots of skills and experience they could help some of our staff with to develop, or help in terms of building volunteering for them, if you like. One partner we're working with at the moment has just provided a CV writing workshop for all our clients, volunteers and staff actually, and it's up there in the charity that if you want your CV reviewed, this commercial organisation will help. So it's a way in which they can volunteer for us in a very specific way. We've also got very other specific volunteers around those almost commercial back office opportunities. But I agree with you, it is a difficult area. For example, we have to have a DBS check on every volunteer that works with us. So if they're only doing 1 hour a month, that's quite a cost to the charity. So we have to balance the opportunity for volunteers with keeping the charity safe in that way. We've just done a culture scan within the charity as well, which has helped us identify what do the people that work with us, staff, volunteers, trustees, want in terms of that EDI piece, Sally, and also that people want representation from the top level at board for a whole range of different differences, because that's what makes us do better work, and we're implementing that right now. So I think looking at partners and seeing what they can do in terms of volunteering, but also how do you improve what you see, you can't be what you can't see, as Sally said, is important too. And collaboration as well. What other organisations are doing volunteering in your area? How could you work with them to bring on volunteers for specific projects, or to work with them on projects?
Thank you so much. I've taken us to the wire on this. There are a number of questions in the chat around creating the financial environment for charities, not forgetting that as we think about AI and NI, and also the sort of what's the evolving impact of the evolving devolution and government footprint, etc., local government footprints. So there's obviously loads of things that we could have another conversation about, and we will take those away and look at the opportunities for doing things around that. May I say a huge thank you to Pippa, to Sally, to Natalie, and to Holly and Chanel for just making this possible, and most of all to all of you who have joined in the discussion, joined in the chat, and have asked questions, and it's really food for thought. And for all those emojis that are flying across the screen now, a huge thank you. Thank you, everyone. Have a good rest of the day and a great weekend.
Bye.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.